Yes, yes. Okay, so how you doing, bro?
I'm doing quite phenomenal at the moment. I'm sitting in my house and kind of preparing for the coming winter or the coming pandemic. But yeah, other than that, it's going really good.
Yeah, so have you bought lots of toilet tissue?
Well, I didn't buy like a lot of toilet paper, but I did buy like primarily frozen meat, frozen vegetables, and yeah, just the things that I would normally eat anyways. So kind of
Yeah.
it's not like a big issue, or it doesn't take any more extra effort to just have like a bit of more extra food on the fridge.
That's true, you know. Yeah, that's true. I guess, this whole outbreak that is taking place. I've been taking it quite casually. I'm just buying food as normal, going to the supermarket, strolling about, and it's just quite empty. Um, I've seen people have started to buy lots of um, rice, pasta, and what else? Toilet tissue. I'm
Yeah,
like, what's with the
that's a big
toilet
one.
tissue? Are people going to start eating that? I
Yeah.
don't know, man.
Yeah, it's like the comfortable world. Like the toilet paper is like a luxury in nature.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, if things start to get worse, I think toilet tissue is probably the least of my worries.
Yeah, that's right.
Fairness. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so the reason why I wanted to speak with you today. First of all, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no
Um,
problem.
I'm a great fan of your work. I recently came across it through social media. Obviously, your Instagram page varies greatly in its content in regards to upgrading the body and optimizing yourself. Provides a lot of information on external and internal influences on biology and I guess the stars were aligned, which brings us today. Because I discovered your podcast or a podcast where you was talking about longevity and more so to do with autophagy. And that's the real key area that I want to focus on because I know that's your area of expertise. And recently you came out with a book called Metabolic Autophagy and in there you also have some parts which you call the hallmarks of aging.
Mm.
And what I'd like to do is to probably cover those. If we cover a few extras, then that'll be great. Like if you feel like there's anything else you feel worth covering, but I'd definitely like to talk about the hallmarks of aging.
Mhm.
um what was the first one in your book? Let's start. What is it that you would say is the most important things of aging? What are the hallmarks? Where do we start with that?
Yeah, like there's been this sort of a quest for humanity to figure out and scientists to know like what is causing aging and hope to kind of fix it. And they have figured out a few of the key characteristics and a few things that start to go wrong, such as there's the theory of the mitochondrial theory of aging that's been predominant for like the last few decades, which essentially means that as you get older, the mitochondria start to produce, or as your mitochondria become more dysfunctional, which are the energy producing organelles of your body, then that accelerates aging, and that's ultimately the reason why you age. You kind of start to suffer from energy production. But there are also some other factors like, telomere shortening,
Mm,
general epigenetic alterations, and deregulation of nutrient signaling, and cellular senescence, which is like the accumulation of these zombie cells that spread inflammation and disease. And yeah, like generally just wear and tear of the body. But recently, what I've what I've come across over the last few months has been the information theory of aging, which is uh, hypothesized by Dr. David Sinclair from Harvard. And
mhm,
he has this idea that, okay, we have all these different factors that contribute to aging. What is the kind of thing that brings those things together? And what's
mm,
the kind of one singular thing that is causing all these things to go wrong. And he, in his view, it's this loss of epigenetic information that happens over the course of time that is starting to break out all these other parts. And this epigenetic information is almost like the way your body is behaving in any given moment based upon the kind of signals it gets from the environment and what kind of stimulus does it receive. So you have the genetics, which is your DNA, your heritage, and those things, and then you have the epigenetics, which is the lifestyle as well as the environment. And
I've heard so quickly that when describing epigenetics, there was an expression used where you do have the genetics, which is like the hardware, and the lifestyle, which is the software,
yeah.
and it really depends on the software which you install in your hardware, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like exactly. The scientists think that your longevity and lifespan, they're determined by like up to 80% by your epigenetics and only 20% by your genetics. So you can play around a lot with those things. And yeah, like what you do every day does have like a quite a long-term effect on your longevity.
Mm. What do you think about this outbreak then? How do you feel it's affecting people's lives right now, even if they are not actually affected by the coronavirus? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, like in a way, it kind of makes people more aware of their immune system and their health. So if they do know that people with these additional comorbidities, such as like diabetes or cardiovascular disease or obesity, or generally just not being healthy, then all those things can make the disease worse and increase your susceptibility of getting it, as well as suffering more severe symptoms. So maybe some
Mm.
people would like pay more attention to taking care of themselves, which itself is just improving their like epigenetic signaling. But at the same time, it's also like it's also more difficult to stay healthy if you're stuck in quarantine or if you don't have access to fresh food and fresh vegetables and those things. So yeah, it's a kind of a chicken and egg, or it's like a double-edged sword. Like, in some aspects, people are more careful with their health, and they may take some proactive measures against it, like taking some more exercise, taking a sauna, or doing some form of like just walking in nature and those things. But yeah, like most people may not have the access to it, and they end up eating like pasta and rice in their apartment.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which probably going to end up affecting their body, making it worse, if anything, isn't it?
Yeah,
And when I think about hospitals and the way they are designed, it's not, it's you're underneath artificial light. You don't have any natural
yeah.
sunlight. There's no grounding. There's probably a lot of EMF in there as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's true. And vitamin D that you get from sunlight is very important for the immune system. And yeah, just the artificial light may be more damaging than beneficial.
mm, yeah. One thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned all this genomic stuff. Could you talk a bit more about the genomic instability, which where you get genetic damage? How is that generally occurred? How
Well, it's usually occurs in some aspects as a byproduct of just living. There's gonna be some mutations and some damage as a byproduct of just breathing and digesting food and just living. But a lot of it is magnified in the current environment of like air pollution, pesticides, plastics, heavy metals, and these other chemicals around house chemicals, house cleaning chemicals. All those things can affect this stability. And yeah, like it's not that this every single thing is inherently harmful. It's just that once you start adding all those things up, then this sort of a cumulative effect occurs that it's not like one single thing is going to be making you die sooner. It's just that all those things pile on top of each other, and then you don't have like the ability to deal with it in such large
Mm,
quantities. The body has, or the human body has always evolved under different environmental stressors. But in the modern world, we have like these unnatural stressors, and they're kind of all around us. So we're not really familiar with them, and we haven't built up that, like we haven't built up specific defense mechanisms against those things. And yeah, it's just kind of a small mismatch between our natural biology and the urban environment.
How long do you think it will take before our body starts to become used to it or adapt to it? Do you think we will be able to at some point?
I think so, or I at least hope so. So maybe, for example, another good example of already existing adaptations is like EMF and radio waves and radio frequencies. So if you were to, people in New York City, they're constantly surrounded by this, massive amounts of EMF, and most of them don't really notice it, and most of them don't experience any negative symptoms. But if you were to like drop some hunter-gatherer from the Amazon into New York City, then they would get like a massive headache. They would actually, break out, and they would experience all these negative symptoms because they've never really experienced anything like that. So their body is not adapted to that kind of a stimulus, versus the people in New York City, they've already gotten used to it and they don't notice it.
What's your thoughts on 5G? Do you feel that's going to be pretty bad, or not really that much of a difference from what we currently have?
Well, I think that it would, you can't avoid it completely. So you probably would have to adapt to it, and it can work as a hormetic stressor as long as you get enough time for recovery. So in a way, you would have to kind of create these environments into your household or somewhere around that area where you can be in this low EMF state, and where you can ground and those sort of things, as to kind of allow your body to recover from the stimulus. So the hormesis aspect is like a biphasic dose-specific response to a stressor. So a small amount of stress is actually beneficial because it can upregulate your body's defense mechanisms. But if it gets too hard, or it's too stimulating, then you're going to experience these diminishing returns, and it's actually going to become harmful because you're kind of taking it too far. So the sweet spot is somewhere in the like not too much and not too little, and and
Right.
it's depends on the particular type of a poison or a toxin that you were talking about. But you would, yeah, like if you're, as long as you get like some time of grounding, as long as you have like a house where you don't have like the Wi-Fi on all the time, and as long as you're like especially doing sleep, where you would go into like a state of low EMF, where you wouldn't be surrounded by a bunch of EMF, then I think most people would be fine. They would just kind of get used to it after a while.
Right. So, in terms of mitigating factors, like switch off Wi-Fi during the night, what EMF protecting devices can the person have in their house that might help during that time, or even now? Some sort of grounding material you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm using like a grounding mat. I sleep on it, so it kind of, the wire goes outside into the ground, and I have the mattress in my bed upstairs. So I'll sleep on it, so I'll be staying grounded. But you can also use that same idea while working on your computer or anything else. So you just have to kind of, you can use these like grounding patches where you attach it on your skin or onto your body or whatever it is, and the wire goes outside into the ground with a metal rod and kind of keeps you grounded. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
Are there any like video tutorials on how to do that? That sounds pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, like it's not like really complex. It's not difficult. Yeah, just plug the metal rod outside, and like some sort of a conductor, and the wire itself can come through your window, and then you have like this. You can attach it onto your mattress or like a patch, and yeah, it's pretty easy. But additional things, what I use also is like the blue shield, which is supposed to be, yeah, like an EMF protector. And they do have like some studies on like animals showing that it works in some ways, like lowering stress and maintaining better cellular functioning. But yeah, like it's something that I do as a precautionary measure. So I don't have like specific data to support that it actually works. But I do notice myself that like I do feel less stimulated if I have this blue shield turned on, and it's not like
Sorry, what is Blue Shield? I don't
it's
think.
like so it's sort of like a cube. I'm not sure how exactly the technology how it works either, but it's a sort of this EMF blocking cube, and in this creates this sort of a radius that is
Mm.
essentially supposed to block some of the EMF.
So it works by like frequency being emitted in the air to.
Yeah, something along that.
So wouldn't that affect the use of like your wireless router or anything like that?
Well, I haven't noticed anything like that.
Right, right. Have you heard of something called Somavedic?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
Yeah.
like the lamp or.
Yeah, it looks like a lamp. That's right. Yeah. Have you looked into that, into the technology of that at all?
No, I haven't. I've only heard of it.
Right. What I do know is that it's got these crystals and semi-precious crystals in there, which somehow it helps to harmonize the body. It doesn't exactly block EMF, but it's supposed to work at a different frequency to harmonize and protect the body
Hmm.
from free radicals. Apparently, there's like clinical studies which have shown that free radicals was reduced when the Somavedic was switched on in the house. I don't know too much about the science on that, but there's lots of studies where people have undergone tests and all that sort of thing. So I just wanted to know if you knew a bit more about that and whether that was part of your I don't know, longevity protocol.
Well, it might work like if it's harmonizing the environment.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and even like the placebo effect can be powerful.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You know what? I'll at least work with that. It's supposed to structure water as well.
Okay.
Um, I've got a book by someone. Oh, what is his name? Something Pollock.
Yeah,
Um,
Gerard Pollock.
Gerard Pollock, yeah. I still haven't read his book. I've got so many books, and it's like I'll see a little bit of one and then a little bit of another. I don't know. Maybe it's a shiny penny syndrome with different books or something. But what tends to happen is I'll be subscribed to podcasts like yours, for instance, and I'll get a notification, and it's so easy listening. I'll
Yeah.
just like, I don't have to sit there and really focus. It just plays and I won't really think about it. But yeah, his book is on obviously structuring water. And I found that really interesting how, you know, there's also a theory, I don't know the truth in it, but you can actually get structured water from the vegetables that we eat, or they
Okay.
come in a structured form, H3O2 or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Somavedic is supposed to as well structure water. So I feel all right. I haven't been sick. I haven't caught any virus. So I don't know. I'll live off the placebo if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, so I've heard different theories on telomeres. Like if you was to have a telomeres test, um, there's like less there's less strong evidence to determine how well your body is doing to check your telomeres than if you was to do a Horvath epigenetics
Mm.
I don't know test.
Yeah.
But how does telomeres work, and why should anyone be concerned about it?
Yeah. Well, telomeres themselves are these nucleotide sequences at the ends of chromosomes. So they're like the kind of protective caps that protect the chromosomes against deterioration. And in a way, shorter telomeres would lead to more epigenetic loss of information, and preserving that these telomere cap will have like a protective effect. And there is some association between longer telomeres and longer lifespan, and as well as shorter telomeres and the shorter lifespan. But
Mm.
it's the reason why it may not be that accurate is that there are like some additional factors that can affect this process, and you can also like regrow some of the telomeres, and they can grow back in a way. So I think uh, the reason why it may not be, it does indicate some aspects of aging. You probably don't want to have like super short telomeres, but yeah, like the confounding variables tend to like make it more context dependent. But you mentioned the Horvath's clock, which is the Horvath's clock is measures your DNA methylation, and that they think that is more of at the moment currently is the most accurate way of assessing your biological age. But you know, there's also like different clocks that they've figuring out constantly. So yeah,
Right.
like I did take my the Horvath clock test a few weeks ago with the brand My DNAge, but I haven't heard the results yet. So we'll
Oh,
see.
right. Did you say last week?
I know it was like last month or something. So
Last month?
yeah,
I think that when I had it done, it took probably slightly longer than 6 weeks.
yeah.
And what they did say was that they had quite a lot of people that had it done, and it's a long process. And they had a backlog of people they had to deal with. So I'm sure they'll let you know. I'll be interested to know. I would definitely be interested to know. I do a lot of things to try to, to try and live right. Yeah, I've even started the breathing exercises, visualization. I'll go through. I have like some what do you call it? Hydrogen water, which I drink
Mm,
every day. I take some activated charcoal every once in a while, and loads of different things here and there. Obviously, I train,
mhm.
um, but it's like I was expecting my results to turn out like maybe 5 years younger, but it was like 2. I was like, what's this? Although it was good, I was
Yeah,
still disappointed.
right.
So at the time when I took it, I was 40, and it said my result was 38.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
it's still very good, I think.
yeah, which is cool. So, all right. So back to telomeres or telomeres. How how can a person lengthen their telomeres if it's short? What sort of things?
Yeah. Well, like you know, what shortens telomeres is generally stress and chronic stress and inflammation. So anything that is, you know, we mentioned these environmental toxins and those things, they inevitably will have like an effect on shortening the telomeres. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, then the only few known ways of lengthening the telomeres is things like meditation and yeah, just like stress management, as well as like in terms of food. Then the only food that has been shown to lengthen telomeres is like red meat, if I'm not mistaken. So
Oh,
like
really?
yeah,
Red meat lengthens telomeres.
yeah, and
But everyone's gone vegan.
yeah. Yeah, it's slightly like a misleading concept that protein and meat is bad for you, because you know what protein and meat do is just stimulate the body's anabolic growth pathways, and you know, growing muscle as well as growing telomeres. Then they are like anabolic process. You need some like energy as well as the specific nutrients for that growth. And if you're constantly depriving yourself from these nutrients, then your bodies will just eventually just start to deteriorate, and that in turn can accelerate aging, because you're losing your muscle mass, and you're losing your bone density, you're losing your, I don't know, hair or whatever it is. You're losing your, yeah, like the general vigor that is associated with longevity, and that's why I think that the idea that protein and meat are bad for you is very kind of misleading, and it's definitely not like what most people would. It's not applicable to most people's goals.
Right, right, right. Do you think that certain people will thrive off not eating meat, or do you think that Yeah, it's only a certain amount of people, or do you think it's possible to live a thriving life without meat? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think that it's possible, like especially in the modern world, we have like supplements, so we can supplement basically anything that we don't get from animal products. Like you can supplement B12, you can supplement creatine, and all the other nutrients that you get. Um, but I think it's gonna be there's gonna be like a bell-shaped curve for these diets. So on one end of the extreme, you have like the carnivore diet, and the other end of the extreme, you have the vegan diet, and approximately 10% of the population will need to do one or the other, and like the rest of the 80% of the people will do somewhere in the middle. Like a mixture of both. So
Mm,
yeah, like these extremes, they can work for some people, but they're definitely not necessary for everyone. And most people would actually do better by just eating like an omnivorous diet and like a more balanced way of eating.
mm, mm. What kind of diet do you follow?
I myself, if I were to gonna describe it, then it
Mm,
would be like a cyclical keto diet with intermittent fasting. So basically, I do eat most of the time. I eat low carb and high protein, and but on some other days I also incorporate some days where I eat more carbs because I want to maintain this sort of metabolic flexibility and just use the carbs for like physical performance as well as insulin sensitivity and so on. So I don't want to ever lose my body's ability to handle certain nutrients just because of avoiding them. And I want to keep myself in this very flexible state and adaptable state so I can just use whatever kind of fuel source that I come across
yeah.
and not become like resistant to anything.
Cool. If I was to put myself in a category, it would probably be that as well.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cyclical, keto, intermittent fast.
Yeah, because
Um,
your body's like your body's energy requirements change all the time on a daily basis. So, like for example, if I'm not working out, then I don't need that many carbs either, and I would actually be better off by staying low carb. Versus if I do have like some sort of a crazy massive workout, then the carbs that I would use or the carbs that I would eat wouldn't be would be put into better use just because they're consumed at the right time around like the exercise.
mm, mm. Yeah, makes total sense. Same here.
Yeah.
I trained not so long ago. Yep. Post workout carbohydrates. Absolutely. If I'm not
Yeah.
training, then just probably fish or meat and vegetables, just,
Mhm.
putting it in a simple format. Um, I wanted to ask mTOR, like when is a good time for it to be stimulated? And why is it not so good for it to be stimulated too often
Mhm. Yeah. It kinda
or
goes back
activated?
some of the that I talked about the protein. So mTOR is one of those growth switches that makes your body grow whenever it is activated. And mTOR is responsible for muscle hypertrophy, muscle growth, but it's also responsible for things like just cell replication, cell survival, and stem cell proliferation. And but at the same time, it just makes everything grow, like including fat cells and the cancer cells or malignant cells potential as well. So if you have some sort of like a cancer, then having mTOR turned on all the time isn't probably like a good idea. But for most people who don't have cancer, then for them mTOR isn't that big of an issue because, like we said, mTOR still has like quite a lot of benefits, like muscle growth and strength and that thing. So
Mm,
you probably in animal studies and like fruit flies and those things, if they have like mTOR constantly turned on all the time, then it does accelerate their aging because it's just making the body grow and keeping them in this fit state. Uh, but I don't think that's gonna be very applicable to human studies because we're gonna somewhat different and we have different metabolisms and as well, like I think if you're using mTOR for like building muscle and using it for its right purpose, then it's probably like actually a beneficial thing for longevity because you're kind of enabling yourself to build more muscle mass, which is also very beneficial for longevity. But with that being said, having it turned on all the time may not be like just a good idea either. So you would probably want to counterbalance it with the opposite of mTOR, which is autophagy. And when mTOR is turned on, then autophagy cannot happen. And as a result, your body will also not be able to kind of eliminate the waste material that accumulates there and essentially just remove these dysfunctional cell parts. So mTOR and autophagy work almost like in a seesaw. And if you do eat, especially protein or carbs, then you raise mTOR and you suppress autophagy. But autophagy will rise when you start to fast and even maintain some aspects of it if you're eating like low carb. So, that's why having some periods during the daytime where you can extend the length of the autophagy state can be somewhat beneficial, and it depends on like the context. If you're exercising hard, then you would need more of the mTOR stimulation versus someone who is more sedentary or someone who has diabetes. Then for them, they would benefit more from staying in the autophagy state for longer. And for that means like just eating less often, skipping a few meals every once in a while, and not spiking your insulin and not spiking mTOR like with these frequent snacks and frequent meals. So like in the bodybuilding community, like a few years ago, it was this main doctrine that you need to eat 6 small meals a day to spike to spike mTOR and build muscle. So it is true that eating more frequently will build more muscle, but at the same time, like, is that the particular goal of the person? Depends on the individual. So a lot of people don't like they don't want to go on some sort of a bodybuilding stage, and they may actually want to just promote the longevity. So for them, kind of at least like being aware of how often they stimulate mTOR and managing it with some autophagy is probably a smarter idea and more applicable to their goals.
Let's say there's people who want to compete on the stage, bodybuilding
Mm.
stage. They do want to stimulate mTOR, but they do want to live a bit longer. Um, how do they how do they work through that?
Right. Well, you can still build muscle with, for example, eating 2 times a day or eating 3 times a day or even eating once a day. The kind of determining the process may be just somewhat slower, and it's definitely like a bit of suboptimal. So for example, whether or not you build muscle or lose muscle depends on the daily balance between muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein breakdown. So while you're fasting, then you are more catabolic, so to say, you're breaking down some of the muscle tissue, versus if you're fed, then you're promoting muscle protein synthesis. And if you, let's say, if you compensate for the daily fasting period with consuming adequate amounts of protein and doing some resistance training, then you can eventually still build muscle. The process is just going to be slower. And they have done some studies, a lot of studies actually, where they see that, where they compare, for example, eating 2 meals a day or even eating once a day, and it's not going to make the person lose muscle as long as they're eating like a high protein diet and they're getting enough calories. So a lot of the times people may lose muscle because they're not consuming enough protein, and your body can still absorb all the protein in a particular meal. It's just going to slow down some of the absorption rates, and there's going to be just the rate limiting factor for muscle protein synthesis. So you can only stimulate muscle protein synthesis up to a certain threshold per meal, and that threshold is said to be around like 30 to 40 grams of protein. And if you eat more protein, then it's not necessarily going to make you more build muscle. And the only way you overcome this threshold is to spread out your protein intake throughout the day, so you have 3-5 meals. But
Right.
if you still spike muscle protein synthesis like once, twice, or 3 times, then you still get like the pro anabolic effect, but it's just shortened and constricted a little bit, and therefore the end result may be somewhat slower, but it's still possible.
Right, right. So if I understand it correctly, if somebody tried to take like all those meals from, let's say, 6 or 7 meals in a day, and they try to comprise it around a short period of time, they're not going to get the same amount of muscle protein synthesis as that. Do I understand that?
Yeah, like if you spike muscle protein synthesis with frequent meals, then you potentially may build more muscle, I think. But at the same time, you can also make the argument that as your body gets more used to some fasting, then it's also going to adapt to it better, and you're going to lose less muscle. So
Mm,
there are studies, for example, well, fasting promotes growth hormone, which is not like a pro muscle building hormone, but it does have like an anti-catabolic effect, and it prevents protein degradation. So in a way,
mm,
if you burn less muscle during fasting than someone who is not doing fasting, then it can potentially counterbalance it.
yeah.
And the same applies to autophagy as well. Autophagy can also protect against some muscle loss, because it works like this hormetic stressor that the body gets used to more catabolism, and therefore starts to efficiently use other fuel sources in a better way, as opposed to relying on protein and glucose. So you're not going to burn nearly as much muscle as you would if you were to do no fasting. So yeah, it kind of balances itself out. I think, for example, the minimum, or the kind of, you don't necessarily have to eat like 5 meals, but even like a physique athlete and a physique competitor, they can still eat maybe like 2 meals, and that's already like a pretty good, uh, you're already getting sufficient amounts of autophagy, and you're already also promoting sufficient amounts of protein synthesis. So yeah, like too much autophagy isn't necessarily good either, and you
What's
always,
an example of too much autophagy?
well, yeah, generally, like muscle loss in general can be a sign that
Mm,
you're becoming more frail, you're not making any progress, and you're losing muscle tissue, and even like losing your hair, losing skin elasticity. Those things, they're just signs that your body's being too catabolic and breaking down constantly. So you do need to nourish yourself, and getting the pro growth nutrients and a
yeah.
pro growth signal that you would get from eating. So yeah, like a lot of the times people may just go towards the extremes again. They're going all in with autophagy, or they're going all in with the mTOR signaling. So the kind of answer is always somewhere in the middle.
Mm,
Another sign of too much autophagy can be like some neuropathy, for example, where your fingers, they start to lose their blood flow and they become numb and those things. So
mm.
yeah, there's plenty of like some few negative sides to autophagy, and it's not always good.
Well, when I started to do the fast, it was a bit difficult. It was a bit difficult at the beginning because, like I'd been reading magazines where they said, yeah, you need to have all of these supplements and you need to eat like from the moment you wake up until just before bed. I was just constantly eating. At work, I'm snacking as well. And I think it is a typical concept with a lot of people that they follow. And so I was like, all right, let's try this intermittent fast. And I think on the first few days, I did fail quite miserably. But as time has gone on, I've now incorporated intermittent fast on most days. I'll say at least 5 days out of the week. On the weekend, it varies. Sometimes I'll do it throughout the weekend as well. I find it quite easy, but it's a bit different when you're with family. You might just be like, oh, I'll be flexible today. But it's so interesting because considering I used to eat from early in the morning, I'm talking like maybe 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
all the way up until maybe 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening. Now I'll eat in a like window of like maybe 4 hours. I don't really see that much of a difference in muscle loss, like if any. I feel like energy levels is so much better. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm like, how's this possible? Like even I don't understand. You've
Right.
explained part of it, but I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is so weird, but it works.
Yeah.
And there's people like when I tell people, yeah, sometimes I'll have like one meal or two meals, and they're like, but how? Like, look at all that muscle you have. I'm like, dude, I don't know. I'm just like, I read it's good. I tried it. It works. You just got to try it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, definitely that part about maybe the growth hormone part of it, and that kind of anti-catabolic effect
Yeah.
from the autophagy.
And for example, like the ketone bodies, the ketones that you produce while fasting, they also have anti-catabolic effects. So yeah, your body doesn't really want to get rid of the muscle. As long as the signal is there that it needs it, is not going to try to get rid of it. So therefore, the most important variable is the training stimulus. So you have to kind of exert the muscles and give your body a reason to have it. Because if you were to fast without doing any training, then you would lose muscle because the body doesn't need it, and therefore it's not going to keep it around. So that's why the training, even at like a calorie deficit, and a lot of studies show that the diet, while dieting and being in a calorie deficit, then the training stimulus is the most important factor that prevents the muscle loss, as well as like a high protein intake. So even if you are eating fewer meals, I think personally, and from my own experience and from the science, I would say that you would still have to eat like a high amount of protein,
Mm,
and because your body would use that protein to build tissue, as well as increase or fill up the amino acid pool that it's going to draw upon while it is fasting.
mm.
So your body can store like a small amounts of amino acids for the next coming maybe like 24 hours or such, but there is no like long-term storage for amino acids. So that's why kind of keeping the protein intake somewhat constant is very beneficial and important.
And your body will speak to you as well. I've I know that I've tried in the intermittent fast. Well, not even tried, but I remember at one point where I didn't really have that much protein. I might have had a lot more vegetables, maybe a bit more fats.
Mm.
And after I'd finished eating, yeah, and some carbs as well. After I finished eating, I still felt hungry. And I ate more, but I still felt hungry. And I was like, wow, man, I don't know how this is going to work. But the moment I switched the ratio and increased the protein, wow, I felt so much more
Mm.
satiated. It's quite
Yeah,
interesting. It's like,
it's
yeah,
yeah,
go on.
like the humans prioritize certain nutrients, and we do develop these tastes and cravings for like essential nutrients as well as protein. So the it's called the protein leverage hypothesis. So humans are essentially trying to eat as long as they get enough protein, and protein needs are like very satiating, like I said. And yeah, like we do need a certain amount of protein to maintain the current muscle tissue as well as build it. So that's why processed foods tend to be very hyper palatable, and people can't get enough of them. They can eat until they gorge themselves because they're craving for the protein, and
Yeah.
processed food is generally low in protein. So they can eat like 5,000 calories until they hit this threshold for the protein intake, versus there's things called the protein sparing modified fast, where you are eating only protein and like low carb and low fat, just like 100% pure protein. And those diets are very satiating, and you kind of get sick of eating because you're getting massive amounts of protein and you're hitting the threshold with very low calories, and you can actually lose weight. So yeah, like the
Mm,
protein is like a very important factor for satiety, and yeah, like general the feeling of fullness and that you reach.
mm, mm. You mentioned earlier about a amino pool that you have. Like, how much can you have in your amino pool before it starts to overspill? You
Right.
say.
I'm not sure how big it is, but I would imagine it's probably like maybe it's your liver glycogen is the kind of the first kind of central hub for energy homeostasis. So
Mm,
liver glycogen is used for regulating your blood sugar, and the liver can contain about 100 to 150 grams of glycogen, and usually that gets depleted within the course of like 20 to 24 hours of fasting or eating low carb. So you can deplete that quite rapidly. And I would imagine that the amino acid pool can be maybe around the same size. So I think that would be probably quite similar.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good to know. I'll bear that in mind. um, um, with mitochondria, like, I think you'd mentioned about if there's issues with the mitochondria, then that would affect your longevity. Um, what are some of the things that can really help to strengthen and boost your mitochondria to have it
Mm,
firing on all cylinders, just waking
yeah.
up, cartwheeling out of bed, smiling?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are the main things for boosting your mitochondria, would you say?
Yeah, well, there's two let's say factors or two components to having a functional mitochondria. One is the number of mitochondria, which is like how many of them there are, and then there's the mitochondrial density, which is how much energy is one mitochondria able to produce. And the sweet spot is a balance between the two, because if you have too many mitochondria, then it can become like a waste. You can start to waste energy because you have so much extra resources that you have to spend on maintaining that large amount of mitochondria, and the single isn't producing enough energy. Versus if you have only very dense mitochondria, then the total amount of the mitochondria is smaller, and but the individual mitochondria are producing more energy as well. But that can also be problematic because it makes your body too efficient. Like your metabolism is running so efficiently that you start to burn less calories, and you don't need to kind of get extra calories from food. So it's almost like this starvation state or the hibernation state, where the body is just in this metabolic winter and almost like shutdown, compared to something that is super inefficient and wasting a lot of energy, which is like a sugar burner or something like that, like
Yeah.
this ectomorph kind of person that is just wasting energy, and they're not able to build muscle, and they're not able to maintain their stable body weight.
How
So
would a person have all of this mitochondria and like extra and
yeah, things that promote this phenomenon of mitochondrial biogenesis or the creation of new mitochondria is activities like endurance exercise has been shown to do that. Then fasting can also do it, and certain nutrients like CoQ10 and for example like polyphenols, those things they promote the mitochondrial biogenesis. And as well as things like, on the opposite hand, things that promote the mitochondrial density are things like taking a cold shower, cold bath, and resistance training, and fasting does it as well, and then maybe some saunas and those things. So generally,
Mm.
you can find some sort of a balance between them, and they're kind of the optimal is like this sort of a yeah, like a peak between mitochondrial biogenesis and mitochondrial density. Because if your mitochondria are only too dense, then you may just slow down your metabolism. But if your mitochondria is too, populated or inefficient, then that can also, well, like maybe for some people it's beneficial if they want to lose a bunch of weight, but that can also sacrifice some of the muscle tissue and just make the person too frail. So yeah, you have to kind of find a balance between do these two aspects.
So you mentioned sauna and I think cold
Yeah,
showers.
yeah.
Um, would you say it's good to do one and immediately the other, or maybe separate the days on that?
Well, like if I usually do take like a sauna, then I'll combine it with some cold exposure as well, whether that be like a shower or an ice bath or like a lake or something. So it just feels better, and I think it is more effective as well, because you're getting like this additional lymph drainage. So in the hot, you're sweating out the sweat and the toxins and those things,
Mm.
and that does promote blood flow and cardiovascular health. But if you go to the cold, then that also like creates this opposite effect. So it gets the lymph flowing as well. So the lymph system itself doesn't have like an automatic circulation system like your blood does. Your blood is being pumped all the time through the heart, but the lymph doesn't have like this central pump, and therefore things that do stimulate that and keep it moving are like exercise, jumping around and rebounding and staying active. But the alternating between the hot and cold also does that. So I think that's beneficial, and a lot of the like the subjective like mental state is also pretty supreme after you do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Doing it just
Uh,
that one way.
I've been out in the cold. I haven't done. I'll be honest. I'm quite scared of cold water. I try the cold shower, and it frightens me every time. I don't know. I think more my cortisol levels goes up. I don't know. Like, but
Yeah, it is like difficult, and it can be shocking. So what I think like you can start off with doing the contrast shower, which is like maybe 30 seconds warm, 30 seconds cold, and kind of go back and forth a few times. Because again, like I would say that doing it together is better because of this lymph aspect versus just doing the cold. Like I used to do the cold shower all the time, and no excuses, and no exceptions, like for a few years back in the day. But I just eventually realized that it's the contrast shower and contrast exposure can be actually better and healthier. So I tend to do it now.
okay. Um, would you say that a cold shower is not as efficient or as good as a plunge, like submerging in cold water, or are they both pretty similar?
Yeah, the plunge or submersion is generally colder, and it's probably more effective. You can get you can get the minimal effective dose faster,
Hmm.
but it can also be, in a way, the cold plunge or the bath is eventually it becomes very like tranquil. Like your initial response, yeah, is to really you know shake yourself up or become very tight, and like you're trying to shiver and resist the cold. But after a while, maybe like within the few 10 seconds or 30 seconds, you eventually just kind of, okay, I'm cool now. Or like I'm relaxed, I'm in control, and then you can actually start to enjoy it
Yeah.
quite a lot. So in a way, it's very meditative, and once you are inside there, the key is to just start to take control of your breath. Because if you tense up and freeze, and you start breathing like 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 not uncontrollably, then that's going to make the stress response much worse. So your initial goal has to be just to kind of take control of the breath, and therefore take control of the stress response as well. So once you do that, then it becomes pretty enjoyable, and it's very meditative, and you kind of start to feel how the blood is pumping
Yeah.
throughout the entire body,
I
and
do question how long it takes before a person can get used to that, because I've been trying just the cold shower alone for a little while now, and it just always frightens me.
Mm,
I was, I don't know, maybe a few months, no, it's probably a bit longer than that. Could have been about 5 months ago. I was in a sauna where there was a little plunge pool. I was with some friends, and yeah, Tim,
mm.
you know, Tim. So I was with Tim, and I was with who else? I was with Ryan as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, Tim Gray, Ryan Carter, and someone else. Everybody got in so easily, and they were like relaxing. I got in there, and I was given the instructions that you need to control the breathing, and I was trying. I really, really was. I was like, come on. I was struggling. It was such a struggle, and I was like, is is there a gene which is in control of that, where it's like, you know what, your gene says no? There's a book called The Dirty Gene, and I haven't gone into that, but I'm just wondering whether there is something there, or I just need to practice a lot more than maybe an average person, or what, you know?
Maybe like a little bit, but I think that's one of those epigenetic things that you can start to condition yourself to endure.
Yeah.
And like one way of going about it, or the one idea that I like to use, is that in order to resist, instead of resisting the cold and tensing up, you have to kind of yield to the cold. So you have to kind of let your body really loose and just let it happen.
Mm.
And once you do that, then you can, even focusing on the exhale only just gives you something to kind of grab onto and put your focus on, as opposed to focusing on the cold, hitting your body and
Yeah.
making it tense.
I noticed it. I think the first place I feel it is probably my back.
Mm. Have you
Um, my
have you taken
chest is
like
all right. Huh?
have you used the cryo chamber?
Do you know what? Cryo, at one stage, I was using that and I was going maybe once every week,
Mm.
and absolutely fine. That was easy. I'll go in there, and I even asked to stay in a bit longer. So I
Mm.
think they give you 3 minutes. I was like, please, let me stay in longer. This is easy. I got in there. It was fine. I even tried to challenge myself. I put a bit of water on myself before I went in.
Oh, nice.
I was good, absolutely fine. But the plunge, or
Mm.
like the shower, cold shower, that's a struggle. Like the cold air, absolutely fine. In fact, when I was younger, I used to work in a freezer,
Oh, really?
and it was like minus 26 degrees.
Oh.
I was wearing the appropriate sort of like working gear, but sometimes when I was working in there, it was kind of like a manual labor job. So when I worked in there, I was getting hot, and I'd be wearing maybe like a long sleeve, or on the occasion I'd wear a t-shirt, and people were like, oh my God, that's crazy. How do you do that? But it was fine for me because my body is always hot, maybe because of the muscle that I have.
Mhm.
But when it comes to the water though, again, crazy. I guess it's going to take a lot more practice, more cold showers, and maybe I'll find a lake and one day just jump in there. Ah! See how it goes.
Yeah, in a way it is like that. But yeah, like just gradual exposure with even just putting your face into cold water and trying to hold your breath in there, maybe just you can give you like some more confidence in kind of not thinking that it's harmful, or not thinking that's gonna make you stressed out or freak out.
Yeah, it's definitely the psychological aspect of that. Um, Stem cells. I know that's another part of potential issues with aging. So, like stem cell exhaustion. Could you tell me a bit more about how that can happen?
Yeah, well, the there are also like additionally similar things that can exhaust these stem cells, and you know uh, just stress, oxidative stress, and inflammation. But yeah, generally also, eating a poor diet and all these epigenetic factors can affect this. And generally, like most people, you know you do have like these stem cells stored in your adipose tissue and bone marrow, but they will also maybe potentially deteriorate as you get older. So therefore, the only kind of usable factor, or the only applicable way of preventing that would be to kind of bank your stem cells when you're young, and then potentially using them later when you're older, because that can avoid the potential that if you can also inject like someone else's stem cells, but that can have like some conflict of interest, or some maybe some autoimmune response or something. So
How
using your
how
own stem
how does it
cells.
work? How does it work? I've heard of people having stem cell treatments, and I find it fascinating. One thing I do know is that it can be quite expensive, so it's not something which is typical amongst most people. Like stem cell treatment, how does it work, and why do people benefit from it?
Yeah, like I myself haven't done it, or I haven't researched it that much.
Mm,
But generally, people would go to like some sort of a clinic, anti-aging clinic, stem cell clinic, and they would kind of draw out the stem cells from your adipose tissue or your bone marrow, and they would kind of spin it around in this, I'm not sure what the machine is called, and then they will inject it back into yourself. So that
Right.
way the stem cells themselves are these universal cells that can swap out any other cell in your body. So if you have like some poorly functioning, for example, like the localized stem cell shots for, like, maybe you have like a shoulder injury, maybe you have like a knee injury, then injecting the stem cells into that location would make the stem cells kind of go into that tissue and repair the damage, in like a universal way, that they would find out what is wrong and then start fixing it, whether that be like skin tissue or skin cells, nerve cells, muscle cells, or that sort of thing.
Mm. Is there is there a preferred method of stem cell treatment, whether bone marrow or adipose tissue? Do they both work pretty much the same, or is there a stronger one to do?
I actually don't know. Like
Right.
I haven't researched it that much, but
Mm.
I've heard that both can work, and both definitely can be applicable.
Right. Right. Got you. Yeah, I definitely want to understand a bit more about that. Um, I've heard of people doing stem cell treatment in their penis and stuff like that. Okay, interesting. What about, talk to me about altered intracellular communication. So if there is an issue there, that as well can create aging, I'll assume, or accelerated aging.
Yeah, well, altered intracellular communication is just um, improper communication between the different systems in your body, whether that be the endocrine system or neuronal system or just central nervous system. So yeah, like essentially that these kind of dysfunctions or misalignments will cause more inflammation and more oxidative stress, because the body has to kind of keep up with itself, or it's not working in synchrony. And these different systems tend to always work interdependently, so you can't really look at, for example, the perfect example would be maybe like the connection between the gut and the brain. So your gut influences the brain a lot, and all the microbes and the microbiome has a profound effect on the functioning of our brain and cognition. So for example, most of the neurotransmitters get produced in the gut, and maybe like even like you know uh, serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter of relaxation, as well as some dopamine, which is the reward neurotransmitter. They get produced a lot in the gut, and what you eat then also has like a direct effect on your brain's health. And like systemic inflammation is also primarily modulated by the microbiome. So if the microbiome is it's suffering from some sort of a dysbiosis imbalances, then it has like a ripple effect on basically every other system in the body as well.
Mm. Wow. 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 I was recently looking at I always kind of thought of serotonin as something that will make you happy. I didn't think of it in any other way, to be honest. Did you say a calm feeling, like relax or something?
Yeah, it's like a satisfactory would be maybe like more
Right.
appropriate. It's essentially just, yeah, makes the body feel safe and relaxed. I would say that they were kind of similar, but
Mm.
yeah, it's not like, it can be like maybe making you, for example, you do experience serotonin when you're like accomplish something, as well as when you're like experiencing some connection, which is not exactly like the love serotonin, or not like the love hormone or anything, but yeah, like just these kind of feelings tend to overlap in some aspects.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I also read that BCAAs can affect absorption of tryptophan, which is the precursor to serotonin, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
So
like
that's pretty
some
interesting.
some amino acids, yeah, can compete with each other. And yeah, like if you take BCAs, then they can also, like some people may report like mild depression from taking it because they're not getting like the tryptophan, and they're not getting the serotonin. So yeah.
Sorry, man. Stop. Yeah, yeah. Well, you think about it, there's a lot of people that are going to the gym hoping that they can take these BCAAs that can help them to recover, build new lean tissue. And I mean, that in itself is like, I mean, BCAAs is already is BS as far as I'm concerned. But not only is it BS, but it can also create depression in the process. So
Yeah.
you're not saving any lean tissue and end up with depression.
Well, it may work maybe like if you're getting enough protein, then it's not important, but it can be useful if you're eating like a low protein diet. So yeah, like most let's say fitness people or someone who is at the gym, then they're already hyper focused on eating enough protein, so they're not probably under eating it. So for them, it's not that big of it's not that beneficial.
Yeah, yeah. What can you tell me about protein folding? I've heard so much about it, and I know that if there's any kind of dysfunctional protein folding, then it's a problem. And it's not something you think about on a regular basis or think about at all. Like you'd think about protein, but you wouldn't think about protein folding. What can you tell me about that? Like in layman terms, like why it's important for us to have the folding process uh, for longevity.
Hmm. Yeah, well, your body is on a daily basis is constantly, breaking down and building up and synthesizing DNA as well as protein. So it's important to kind of make sure that the it's get put into order, so to say. It's put together in the right way, and just if your proteolysis, which is the is if it's dysfunctional, then that's in a way you're putting your body back together also in a dysfunctional way, and misfolded proteins themselves happen as a result of like cellular damage and that sort of thing. So even for example, exercise can create these things, and even and during like heat, when you're exposed to the heat, then you repair some of the damage of the misfolded proteins with heat shock proteins. So yeah, so like essentially we're putting back the protein together.
Okay. Is there any other way of inducing protein folding?
Well, I would imagine that eating protein itself will also be doing that. Like mTOR is probably responsible for that.
Just okay, right. Cool. I think that's everything, man. If there's anything else you reckon would be um, interesting for people to know for longevity, or just well, actually, autophagy.
Mm.
Autophagy itself, we haven't actually. How would you explain to someone what autophagy is?
Yeah, well, autophagy is essentially cellular recycling or cellular turnover, where you're recycling dysfunctional cell parts, different pathogens and garbage and junk, and using it for energy production and kind of sustaining the energy homeostasis. So yeah, anything that there's always some autophagy happening in some basal form, but you can accelerate this with things like that create more energy depletion, like exercise and fasting and saunas. They all promote autophagy because the body is in a more high energy expenditure state. Like your energy demand is higher, and therefore the body kind of has to use its own backup and kind of turn inward. And this is beneficial in for longevity in many ways, mainly by just removing this different misfolded proteins and this different oxidative stress and inflammatory particles, and just keeping the house clean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So intermittent fast is very good for that. What about water fasts or extended fasts where people are fasting for like 48 hours and stuff like that? Would you say it's all relevant or not as relevant for
It would
autophagy?
it would increase the amount of autophagy you get from, like, the longer you fast, then it's kind of probably increase autophagy. Uh, but whether or not it's worth it depends on the particular goals, so, and the particular individual. So, you know, the 48-hour fast or 3-day fast can be good for like weight loss, but you just have to be also aware of just making sure that your diet is on point after coming out of the fast,
Mhm.
and such, and making sure that you exercise and that sort of thing. So, for older people, I wouldn't recommend doing like a very long fast, because for them it's very hard to maintain muscle, and it's just not worth it for them. But younger people, they can safely do like this sort of an extended fast a few times a year, as a way of just keeping housekeeping again, and doing it as a way of also just inducing a larger calorie deficit. So yeah, like both ways work. But yeah, the you know whether or not it's going to actually have like a substantial effect on your longevity would be also dependent of what you're doing when you're not fasting. So you can't really make up for a bad diet and not exercising with fasting. So they kind of complement each other, and you need both.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I had another question, but I freaking forgot. Mm, damn, damn.
We'll leave it for the next time.
It was part of that. Um, yeah, I guess yeah, I'm gonna have to leave that. It's so annoying. But look, it's been absolutely amazing. I really
Yeah,
do appreciate it. You've really given some golden nuggets here. Um, where can everybody find you? I know you're on Instagram. What's your Instagram handle?
it's Siim Land, Siim Land.
Okay.
And
And
my website is also siimland.com, and there I have like articles, and on YouTube it's also Siimland.
excellent, excellent. Yeah, I've seen some of your videos on YouTube. They're great. They're great. I need to
Thanks.
learn from you.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Are you on Twitter as well?
I do have an account, but I don't use it like actively. So
Okay. We just want to know the ones which you're active on. So,
yeah,
okay, sweet. Thank you very much for your time today. I really
yeah.
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and yeah, it was great talking.
Has been a great pleasure indeed. All right. Thanks again. You take care.